Welcome to the Sheltering and DAT Assessment Tools presentation. The agenda for today's presentation is to go over the purpose for this presentation, look at the regional sheltering and DAT goals, go over the Sheltering Capacity Assessment Tool and DAT Capacity Assessment Tool, and review some reminders and questions. This presentation is intended for chapter and regional leadership who will be involved in completing the DAT and sheltering assessments, but are open to any volunteer or employee interested in learning more about these tools. The goals, which we'll look at in a minute, were developed and approved at the beginning of the fiscal year. These assessment tools were created to help you track progress toward meeting the goal and providing a space for dialogue with your DDE or their designee. The regional sheltering goals is to increase the delivery of high-quality disaster and service to the Armed Forces services. Every region must be able to operate or support an operation of at least 2 shelters in each chapter or territory capable of accommodating a total of 200 overnight residents, opening within 4 hours of notification and sustained for 72 hours without support from outside of the region. Another goal is to operate shelters or support shelter operations of at least 2 shelters across the entire region, capable of accommodating a total of 500 overnight residents, opening within 4 hours of notification and sustained for 72 hours without support from outside of the region. Keep in mind that this is a total of 200 or 500 overnight clients, not per shelter. So this could be a shelter of 100 clients and another shelter of 100 clients, or a shelter of 150 clients and another shelter of 50, or one shelter with 200 clients. The regional DAT goal is to increase response rate to single-family and multi-family fires. This is through maintaining sufficient DAT capacity for every chapter or territory to be able to initiate client contact and provide client services within 2 hours of notification of a single family or multi-family fire, and this is consistent with program guidance. Now we're going to go over the Sheltering Capacity Assessment Tool. Along with the tool is a user guide. This user guide provides guidance on who should complete the assessment tool, when to complete it, definitions and resources, and step-by-step instructions. Who completes the Sheltering Capacity Assessment? So these assessments may be done by the Disaster Program Manager or Disaster Program Specialist. Regional disaster officers should ensure that input is received from all chapters to inform discussions with divisional leadership. Most regions complete both a chapter or territory and regional assessment. For example, in the Utah region, there are 3 chapters. Therefore, there should be 4 assessments completed. First would be for the Utah region. The second would be for the Red Cross of Central and Southern Utah. The third would be for the Red Cross of Greater Salt Lake. And the fourth would be for the Red Cross of Northern Utah. Single chapter regions complete 1 regional assessment and no chapter or territory assessment. So when is the Sheltering Capacity Assessment completed? March 31st is the deadline for when the assessments are due. In early April, summary reports will be provided to chapters, regions, and leadership. On June 15th, DDEs will begin surveys to indicate that chapters have met their goal, and on June 30th, DDEs will submit final assessments. While shelter assessments are only due once in fiscal year 17, which is on March 31st, if a chapter or region would like for the DDE to have more up-to-date information for their reviews starting June 15th, chapters or regions may edit their original assessment or submit a new assessment anytime before June 15th. So how is an assessment completed? Regions and chapters can use the assessment tool throughout the year to keep track of their progress toward meeting their sheltering goals. Skylar will walk you through using this tool shortly. Final completion and submission of the Shelter Capacity Assessment tool will be a part of a formal assessment by the end of the goal period, which can be conducted in any of the following situations: through the actual disaster relief operation, through a shelter exercise during a disaster response management team exercise, through a shelter exercise during a disaster institute, a shelter exercise in conjunction with a partner exercise, or a shelter exercise held specifically for the assessment. So this tool is designed to provide you with a list of everything you need to have or have access to within 4 hours of your pre-identified shelters in order to meet your goal. The requirements come from the currently published guidance. There are no new requirements established with this tool. You do not have to own everything on the list or have it all stored in a trailer ready to pull to a shelter. If you can procure the items and have them delivered and in the shelter and operational within the 4 hours, that meets the resource requirements. You might also have cell phones and laptops that are used on a day-to-day basis that your identified shelter managers will take with them to the shelter. This also meets the requirement. You do not need to have dedicated phones and laptops sitting in storage waiting for a shelter to open. The required number of workers to sustain for 72 hours is based on the shelter staffing job tool, with the assumption that only 50% of leadership and 30% of associates and volunteer connection will be available for a given event. The number of workers is the same for both the regional and chapter assessments because they are a per shelter requirement and both goals call for 2 shelters. The required number of resources to sustain shelter operations for 72 hours is based on the shelter supply template job tool. Chapters and regions have different client totals to support. The first number is the quantity needed to meet the chapter goal, and the number in parentheses is the quantity needed to meet the regional goal. The total number is already calculated for you. Some resources are required per person and some are required per shelter. So the 2 numbers may be the same, as in the case for the shelter management kits with forms. Snacks are an example of a per person requirement. For example, to provide 6 snacks per person per day for 3 days requires 3,600 snacks for the chapter goal of 200 clients and 9,000 snacks for the regional goal of 500 clients.
To get started, search for the Regional Reporting Portal on the Exchange. The Regional Reporting Portal on the Exchange is set up to be a one-stop shop for all tools, guides, and reports related to tracking and reporting against goals for the Red Cross regions. To get started with a shelter capacity assessment, click Goal 2 to jump to the shelter-related goal. Underneath Goal 2, you will find several helpful documents and tools for the Shelter Capacity Assessment. The first document, the Shelter Capacity Assessment User Guide, provides step-by-step instructions for how to assess shelter capacity and report on it using the Shelter Capacity Assessment tool. The second document is the Shelter Capacity Assessment Frequently Asked Questions. We recommend that you read both of these documents before completing the shelter assessment. Under the Tools section, you will find a link to the Shelter Capacity Assessment tool and an Excel worksheet of the same assessment. All chapters and regions must use the online tool for final assessment submission. However, the Excel worksheet offers an offline version to prepare and discuss the questions before the final assessment. The tool will open to the DAT capacity assessment by default. Make sure you select Shelter Capacity Assessment from the top left corner. The Shelter Capacity Assessment will open to a blank form. On the left, you will see a list of completed shelter assessments. Ignore this section unless you are looking for a completed assessment. You can search in the search bar for a particular completed form. Across the top, you will see several action buttons. The plus sign opens a new blank form. The trash icon will delete a completed form. Do not delete a completed form unless you are absolutely sure it is yours and it needs to be deleted. A warning will pop up if you try to select this button. The pen icon will allow you to edit a completed form. The disk icon will save the form you are working on. The X icon will close the open form without saving any changes. The main body of the web page includes evaluation information fields. Type of assessment is a drop-down with a choice of chapter or region depending on the level of assessment you are completing. Submission date is the day that you are completing and submitting your assessment. The field "Assessment was last edited by" was added for traceability. There is no expectation that these forms will be changed or updated, but if a chapter, region, or division decides to make some changes based on new shelter capacity information, the person making changes should update this section for traceability so that questions can be directed to that individual. Division and region are drop-down selections, while chapter is a search. Chapter only needs to be filled in if you chose chapter in the type of assessment being completed. To complete the rest of the assessment, check the box next to each question to indicate yes, your chapter or region meets the described shelter need. Available means these resources are within a 4-hour radius of the pre-identified shelters. In the section with explanation/action plan, please provide an explanation of your planned course of action if you did not check the box in agreement. You may also use this space to explain how your chapter or region meets this requirement. Required quantities for certain items will vary if you are completing this assessment for a region rather than a chapter. If there is a region-specific quantity required, it will be in parentheses after the chapter-specific quantity. For example, does your chapter have the following available? 3,600 parentheses 9,000 snacks. 3,600 is the chapter required quantity. 9,000 is the region required quantity. Some quantities will be the same for the chapter and region level, such as the number of red American Red Cross vests. When finished, click Submit at the bottom or the Save icon at the top of the screen. They perform the same action. If at any time you need to edit a saved assessment, simply search for the correct form in the list of completed assessments on the left and click the Edit or Pen icon. When complete, select Save or Submit once again. As a reminder, be sure to update the last updated by field if you are not the person who previously submitted this form. The datasheet view is only available to download your completed form. You should not make edits in this view. Select the Download arrow from the top left. Once the Excel file downloads to your computer, filter it to your correct division, region, and chapter. A formal report will be published in early April 2017 with all of the completed forms grouped geographically and with scores to aid division disaster executives in the assessment at the end of the fiscal year. The division summary view allows anyone to see a quick roll-up of completed assessments by division to determine who has already completed the form. If you want to view the results of any particular form, you'll have to go back to the List tab and search for the chapter or region of interest.
Now let's take a look at the Disaster Action Team Capacity Assessment tool. This tool will help your chapters and regions collect and record information on DAT capacity and readiness. This assessment is intended to help guide discussions between divisions and regions around DAT capacity to deliver services to more of those in need. The assessment will help you to identify strengths and acknowledge the important work being carried out by disaster action teams every day, as well as focus on areas needing improvement and support. It will also help you to establish priorities for building capacity and capability for local and regional responses, and provide a broad framework for building the DAT program in your jurisdictions. Overall, it will help to create a baseline awareness for your DAT program, which will be supported by standard and consistent program guidance and job tools currently in development. Similar to the Sheltering Capacity Assessment tool, a user guide has been developed for the DAT Capacity Assessment tool. As such, it includes guidance on who and when to complete the assessment. It also includes definitions and suggested resources, an assessment key, and step-by-step instructions for accessing and completing the online DAT Capacity Assessment. The DAT Capacity Assessment should be completed by every chapter, with the chapter being the lowest level for which a report is required. If a chapter is subdivided into territories, then each territory may choose to complete separate assessments, using the offline version of the tool for gathering data. Then the information collected can be provided to the Disaster Program Manager or Disaster Program Specialist or designated person at the chapter level who will complete the online assessment. Regional disaster officers should oversee this process to ensure that the assessments are being completed. The DAT Capacity Assessment should be completed twice during this fiscal year. The initial assessment should be completed no later than March 31st. There is value in doing the initial assessment as soon as possible in order to establish baseline awareness of capacity and to track progress made between the initial assessment and the year-end assessment. The year-end assessment should be completed no later than June 30th. Please note that a new assessment should be completed for the year-end assessment. Do not attempt to edit your initial assessment entry. Prior to completing the online assessment, you are encouraged to prepare and collect input for the assessment from multiple stakeholders. An offline Word version of the tool is available on the Exchange to collect input from the stakeholders. The person who will complete the online assessment can use these paper assessments to inform completion of the online assessment. In the user guide, you will find definitions and suggested resources to support completion of the assessment. You are encouraged to familiarize yourself with this information prior to completing the assessment. The user guide also provides information for each focus area. These include timeliness of service delivery, understanding of community, DAT structure, relationships and coordination, volunteer management, and scaling up. Please refer to the guide for descriptions for these areas and more details to support completion of the assessment. Whenever possible, the guide points to currently published doctrine. If no standard doctrine exists, then the guide provides overall guidance and recommendations for completing the assessment for this fiscal year. In the user guide, you will find an assessment key that provides criteria to help the user assess DAT capacity for each focus area. The key aligns with the percentage ranges used in the assessment tool. The key also matches the percentage ranges with 3 color codes: green to indicate implemented, yellow to indicate in progress, and red to indicate not started or needs work. You are encouraged to review the key prior to completing the assessment.
To get started, search for the Regional Reporting Portal on the Exchange. The Regional Reporting Portal on the Exchange is set up to be a one-stop shop for all tools, guides, and reports related to tracking and reporting against goals for the Red Cross regions. To get started with a DAT capacity assessment, click Goal 3 to jump to the home fire response related goals. Underneath Goal 3, you will find several helpful documents and tools for the DAT capacity assessment. The first document is the DAT Capacity Assessment User Guide, which provides step-by-step instructions for how to assess DAT capacity and report on it using the DAT Capacity Assessment tool. The second document is the DAT Capacity FAQ. We recommend that you read both of these documents before completing the DAT assessment. Under the Tools section, you will find a link to the DAT Capacity Assessment tool and a Word document of the same assessment. All chapters must use the online tool for final assessment submission. However, the Word document offers an offline version to prepare and discuss the questions before the final assessment. The tool will open to the DAT Capacity Assessment by default. The DAT Capacity Assessment will open to a blank form. On the left, you will see a list of completed DAT capacity assessments. Ignore this section unless you are looking for a completed assessment. You can search in the search bar for a particular completed form. Across the top, you will see several action buttons. The plus icon opens a new blank form. The trash icon will delete a completed form. Do not delete a form unless you are absolutely sure it is yours and it needs to be deleted. A warning will pop up if you try to select this button. The pen icon will allow you to edit a completed form. The disk icon will save the form you are working on. The X icon will close the open form without saving any changes. The main body of the web page includes evaluation information fields. First, choose the appropriate evaluation period, either initial or year-end. Submission date is the date that you are completing and submitting your assessment. The field Assessment was last submitted by was added for traceability. There is no expectation that these forms will be changed or updated, but if a chapter, region, or division decides to make some changes based on new DAT capacity information, the person making changes should update this section as well for traceability so that questions can be directed to that individual as needed. Division and region are drop-down selections, while chapter is a search. To complete the rest of the assessment, first read each statement and select the % complete from the drop-down menu that most closely represents the current DAT capacity of your chapter. The default value is 0%, so make sure you go through and answer every question. Then refer to the DAT Capacity User Guide for instructions on how to choose between the percentage options available. For each statement, please provide an explanation and planned course of action that will inform the discussion between your region and division. Please refer to the guidance and assessment key on the exchange for more information. Here is an example of information included in the explanation action steps box. This information can be used to highlight best practices as well as a needed or planned course of action for addressing an area needing improvement or attention. This information will also help inform and drive discussions between divisions and regions. Click Submit at the bottom of the form or the Save icon at the top of the screen. They perform the same action. If at any time you need to edit a saved assessment, simply search for the correct form in the list of completed assessments and click the Edit icon. Select Save or Submit once again when done. As a reminder, be sure to update the last updated by field if you are not the person who previously submitted this form. The data sheet view is only available to download your completed form. You should not make edits in this view. Select the download arrow. Once the Excel file downloads to your computer, filter it to your correct division, region, or chapter. A formal report will be published in early April 2017 and again at the end of the fiscal year, with all of the completed forms grouped geographically and with scores based on chapter input. The summary view lets anyone see a quick roll-up of completed assessments by division to determine who has already completed the form. If you want to view the results of any particular form, you'll have to go back to the List tab and search for that chapter.